Welcome to High Stakes, episode 35. I'm your host, Neil Orfield. You can find me on Twitter at PlayerQDFS. High Stakes is produced by Mike Lawrence. You can find him on Twitter at AwesomeYo. And guest today is DFS legend Terry McBride. You can find him on Twitter at DigitalB21. You probably won't find much there. He doesn't tweet all that often. You can also find him on FanDuel and DraftKings. The username is TMcB74. He has won several contests. You're probably familiar with Terry with the screen name at the very least. He has big wins in all four major sports and NASCAR, including a $200,000 win in NFL Showdown. Just huge wins across the board for Terry over many years. He is a baseball savant. Terry, are you excited for the MLB season is back?
Oh, I mean, that's been making my day every day for the last 2 weeks or so since we've gotten into it. Back to creating some content out there in the world, which is good. So people can find that if they hit my Twitter handle. If you're looking for my old articles and stuff, hit up my Twitter handle. There is that every day.
Oh, you are doing that now. That's true.
Stuff, so, excuse me. So, yeah, I am putting some stuff out into the world. But, yeah, in general, if you're looking for somebody good to follow who's going to be funny at midnight and out there tweeting every single day and talking about games and stuff, probably not going to be me. I'm not very good at that stuff. But, yeah, I've been out here a long time in the DFS industry, in fantasy sports in general. I was actually, I've listened to a bunch of high stakes episodes, and I know what you typically get into. So I was kind of preparing my brain. I've got the goldfish memory, so I have to remember these things for myself. So I was looking through some old stuff, but I've been doing, fantasy sports in general since back in 2000, 2001. I think my Yahoo profile starts in 2001. And then my FanDuel join date was in 2014. So I've been a FanDuel member for quite some time. That's where most people would be familiar with me from. I do not play very much on DraftKings. I obviously talk about DraftKings all the time for a living, and we go through it all the time, but I don't actually play most of my action there. It's just on FanDuel. No real reason for that other than just stupid personal preference and probably some laziness.
Yeah, I think personal preference is a valid reason to want to play on FanDuel versus DraftKings. We're going to get into the background, but we got to start with simple stuff. Favorite sports team you got your Yankees hat on. Maybe you're answering the question visually here, but tell me your favorite sports teams and or athletes. Start there. And also where are you from and where are you living now?
So I'm living in Jersey City. I was born in New York, lived for like a year or so or maybe it was like 2 or 3 years. My sister was born in Georgia, let's put it that way. And she's 3 years younger than me. Then we moved back up here to Central Jersey, where I grew up and have basically lived ever since. I'm in North Jersey now. Manhattan is like a mile as the crow flies, just right across the Hudson River that way from my apartment. So nice part of Jersey to live in. But yeah, this is basically the area I grew up in. I'm a New York sports fan, diehard Yankees fan. Grew up in the 1980s. I was born in 79. So if you know your Yankees history, there was kind of a thin era of titles until we got to that 96 team. So at the very worst, I can't be accused of being a front runner or anything like that, like a lot of modern Yankees fans, Red Sox fans, and the like. So I'm a big Yankees fan. They're probably, if you had to say, hey, only one sport can exist, which team? It's probably going to be baseball. It's probably going to be the Yanks for me. But I'm also a big Knicks fan, huge Rangers fan, and a big Giants fan. Football is probably these days my least favorite of the major four sports. But definitely looking forward to my Knicks and Rangers in the playoffs. Hopefully a deep run for the Rangers and a good showing for my Knickerbockers. I'm a realistic Knicks fan.
So no love for football, even though I believe it was just this past fall where you won like 200,000 in NFL Showdown. Was it not?
It was, yeah. Early this season, I had a nice chop of one of the Sunday Millie Maker. It was $1 million chop 5 ways. So yeah, it came out. It was like 190 or something like that. My biggest individual win of all time, which was very, very nice. I've had a lot of solid 5-figure wins, but that was the biggest individual one. So put me over the top for my biggest year of all time, and off and running with things that I'm doing now. So it's a nice feeling, definitely.
Yeah, that was very exciting, and coming off of a very big MLB season, as I recall too. You're crushing it during the MLB season. So yeah, very, very strong year you've had this past year. Let's jump in,
and then that feeds into NBA play, and you can play things the right way. You've got a little bit to work with. So I had a nice NBA year, especially at the beginning of the season. I took a couple tournaments and was consistently placing, nice lineups, and then trailed off as we got past like January into spring basketball lineup changes and everything. I only have so much tolerance for that. So I completely jumped ship on basketball on opening day of baseball season. I haven't played a slate since.
Yeah, I think that's about the time where it's probably smart to jump ship. I mean, there's still plenty of edge to be had with late swap and stuff, but it's just so much tougher like that. Yeah. It's probably even a week or two earlier than that. It just gets so tough with NBA DFS where you just got to be tied to your computer at all times.
Yeah,
so probably the wise move.
Extra chaotic too. It was
this year did feel extra chaotic.
This year was bananas, but might jump back in for some playoff slates, at least the bigger ones. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, those tend to be a little bit easier because you don't have to deal with are they trying to win now? Are they going to play their starters? What's going on here?
Yeah, we kind of know nice tight rotation. We kind of know who's going to be out there boring, something stupid. So
yeah,
makes it fun.
All right. Well, I guess you've watched some episodes, some of the standard questions that I like to ask as far as background goes, and we'll just start there. What kind of background do you have in statistics, if any? Do you have any formal or informal training?
Everything that I have is basically informal. I'm pretty much self-taught on a lot of this stuff. I would probably stand there and nod politely in a conversation where I was, with Alex and some of the other, big heads in the industry as far as the statistics end of it goes. I've got a working knowledge of a lot of that stuff. I have things and tools in Microsoft Excel that help me through all of that stuff that I've built out on my own, just via elbow grease, listening to a lot of smart people, Googling a lot of stuff. So yeah, very much self-taught. Literally have, as far as I can remember, never taken a statistics class. So yeah, a lot of this comes through that. I was a poker player going way back. Like I said, I've had a long time background in fantasy sports, and something that I've talked about, possibly with you on shows, definitely with other people on Stokastic shows, is it's something that I always felt where some of these things like poker, I always felt that when I first started reading poker strategy books, it filled in the background of the why I was doing things that I was already doing more than it was telling me, oh, this is something eye-opening, that this is how you actually play poker, right? Things like pot odds just kind of came naturally to me. So a lot of these things just kind of make sense to me. Where, when I take the courses, read the books, et cetera, it just fills in the why for me and I can explain it to someone better. But yeah, just for whatever reason, and I'm not claiming to be smarter than the average bear by any means, but for whatever reason, these kinds of things just, connect with my brain well. So that's what I got by on largely.
I suspect that you are smarter than the average bear, but not going to make you take an IQ test or anything. But yeah, I mean, your instincts were good. It sounds like your instincts were good for like how to play the games. And then you read the books and it kind of solidifies some of the concepts that you already kind of have in the back of your mind that, you don't know what to call it. You don't know exactly why, but you know that you should be like playing contrarian players, for example. Like that's something that some people are just like, well, you just want to have the biggest score. So you just play whoever is the best plays instead of like, okay, well, this guy's slightly worse, but he's going to be 5% owned as opposed to 20% owned. That kind of thing you just have kind of instincts for, and then of course you read up on it. I guess that's a DFS example, not a poker example. You're talking about poker books, but
yeah, I mean, but the same concept applied. That's basically what I'm saying. Like, once I started playing DFS, I found that, there's a lot of carryover, right? We see tons of poker players, half the people I think that I've heard you talk to have mentioned their poker background. And, I of course had to jump on that train, but, I think there's a lot of crossover between the two, both in a pool of interest and just in, the way that it connects with a certain skill set and a certain kind of thinking. So yeah, it just really worked well for me as the next natural step. I live in Jersey, like I said at the top. So theoretically, I've been allowed to play online poker again for, basically since I've been playing DFS since like 2014, 15. But it just, I don't know, it fell off the table for me. So I was still playing a live home game just for fun, basically every week. But yeah, poker fell off and DFS kind of just replaced it in my life. And it was a nice, easy transition because of how it connected with my brain with concepts like exactly what you're saying, playing contrarian plays, stacking in baseball kind of came to me fairly early on. Getting into, using tools like optimizers and things like that. That's another thing. I was going back through some of my old emails when I first got started looking for all right, when did I first really start looking for tools rather than just building these lineups by hand? And it was fairly early on. Like I said, I started playing in May of 2014, and by mid 2015, I was deep into using some tools in Excel that I had connected with somebody online and done that. And like a week after I purchased that tool, I was emailing with the guy telling him how to improve his tool and how to change it and all that. So it's been a fun ride. But yeah, that's the foundation for where I got started. So no real formal training in terms of statistics. That was a long answer to that question.
No, that was a good answer. That was a very, very strong answer, I would say. But along those lines, I mean, you're talking about early on in 2015 trying to create tools. What kind of training, formal or informal, do you have in computer programming?
None in terms of computer languages. I've dabbled very, very little with it, just through personal interest, through stuff like this. I always used Excel in terms of it being a business tool, but I think it actually might have been your last episode or one of the ones that I listened to recently. Somebody basically said, I always thought of Excel skills as like you can conditionally format something and you can, use it to create a chart and, impress somebody's boss or something like that who has no idea how to use anything. That's kind of what I thought of Excel skills. And then just, diving into this and really getting into the nitty gritty, what Excel can actually do and using it as a tool for DFS and for creating simulations and so on and so forth. It just got so much deeper with it. I would never call myself an expert because I still frequently have to Google, functions and things like that. So again, it's just another spot where hacking and slashing my way through, a lot of time, a lot of hours and elbow grease. Josh Engelman had a big part in helping me learn Excel just by what he used to put on screen in his shows, right at the very outset of Stokastic, formerly Awesemo at the time. So just watching a lot of what he was doing, to the point where I would literally freeze frame and copy a formula, to the point where my baseball dashboard still steals the look and feel of the dashboard that he used because he's so good at laying stuff out. So I learned a lot from him, and then just talking to him, talking to other smart people in our channels, again, just Googling stuff around the industry, and just saying, all right, I want to do this. How can I accomplish that? So through that, I've learned a lot about Excel. I've learned a lot about some different programming methods and languages. I'm still at the point where I haven't totally dove in on Python and learned it and gotten it. But we've got several guys in the Stokastic Discord who those guys have written an optimizer. If people don't like the public optimizers out there, jump in the Stokastic Discord. They've offered it up for free for NBA. So use it next NBA season. But I want to get in there and really start to learn that stuff, rip that apart, build my own and go from there. So I haven't gotten an opportunity to, but that's on the agenda at some point. So I'll be learning Python or R or one of those. And there's so many tools to help with that now too, since the AI tools can basically write the code for you.
Yeah, I've never even thought about using AI for that kind of thing, but at this point, that's probably the easiest way to do it. So
you can literally tell ChatGPT, write me Python code to accomplish, X, Y, and Z, and it will code it for you, to the point where nefarious actors are trying to get it to write code to implant itself on cell phones around the world, and people are actively trying to propagate Armageddon at this point.
Yeah, not particularly shocking, but yeah. All right, so no formal training. You're self-taught in terms of like Excel. Gonna get into Python, not yet, but yeah. So no real formal training. But you've self-taught yourself plenty about both statistics and at least Excel. It sounds like. We talked a little bit about your professional background already. So poker, starting there. I know you said that it sounded like you played poker pretty seriously. Were you ever a pro poker player? Like, where was your primary source of income?
There was a year in there where I half and half paid the rent through unemployment and through poker winnings. It was basically a year where I was kind of taking off in my mid-20s and kind of looking for a new job after having left my first career job. So career-wise, I had basically 2 sales gigs for like 8-10 years each. The first one was in South Jersey. I was living in North Jersey, making a stupid reverse commute to go down there and sell electronic security systems and fiber optic transmission systems. So like cameras and shit and DVRs at local stadiums and things like that all around the world. Good experience. I got to travel like crazy in that job. I went to China twice. I went to Dubai. I went, all around the world and then all around this country for various conventions and everything, but ultimately not the best gig. Actually turned out that like a year and change after I left, the owner of that company put some kind of phony IPO out on the Chinese market and made a few $100 million and probably could have cashed in nicely on that, but we move on. So yeah, that 1 year in there did definitely pay some bills via poker winnings. That was my biggest probably poker year. That was the heart of online poker, when everything was really, really huge in online poker, and there would be $25,000 prize pools every single day, and so on and so forth. And then took a sales job for a computer integration company. So doing big IT projects for, very large companies, airports, and so on and so forth all around the world. Similar kind of thing, traveled around, did a lot of selling, didn't like it at all, at the very least.
I suppose, yeah, you gotta take your lumps. So then you say you got into DFS around 2014 was your start date on FanDuel, is that right?
Yeah, I can tell you the date. I pulled some interesting stuff. So the date was May 20th, 2014. It was baseball season, my friend. Naturally.
That makes sense. Your first love. Is that true? Is baseball, DFS, and or just fantasy sports in general, is baseball your first love?
Yeah, very much so. Fantasy baseball was the first thing I dove into. Me and my friends for the last 20 some odd years have run quite literally what I would put up against anyone as the most complicated fantasy baseball league in the entire country as far as season long baseball goes. We have a multi-page rules document. Emacs talked about it on shows.
Is Emac in the league?
He is. Yeah, we roped him into the league. I think 2 years ago, maybe last year, I forget, but we needed somebody, and I figured he'd be somebody good and dedicated.
He's the right guy for sure.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta love this stuff to be able to play in that league. But yeah, we've got like 5 different types of keepers, 4 different types of long-term contracts that you can sign out to 5 years. You can trade draft picks out to 5 years, so I can trade you like a 2028 first round pick for something now. We've got a minor league system. We've got a Rule 5 draft. It's just completely bananas, this league. So yeah, greatest league of all time. But I play tons of redraft leagues. I was saying it to I think EMAC on a show the other day. I'm in 30 Yahoo Public redraft leagues this season, most of which are just like $20. It's just a $20 buy-in. I don't go for the crazy leagues. Across those 30 leagues, I didn't draft a single starting pitcher because I just go 0 starter and try and win them that way. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I love fantasy baseball. And then, basketball and hockey for season long were always just kind of I would play them. I would dabble, but that's where I was like, ooh, DFS, that really makes some sense for, for those sports. So was happy to jump into that. And then season long football, obviously, like everyone else in the country, I've done for years as well.
When you're playing fantasy season long fantasy baseball, are you playing is it roto leagues? Is it like head-to-head leagues? What kind of leagues are you playing?
Roto leagues exclusively. Actually, I'm in one head-to-head league that I would love to leave, especially since they moved it from Yahoo to Fantrax this year because the Yahoo took away their message board. So now it's on Fantrax. So now I have to go to a completely different site to stay in that league. But it's a totally free league. There's no money involved. And it's a yearly ongoing keeper league that I just randomly stumbled my way into in like 2014. And the only reason I'm still in it is because I have such a good goddamn team and I'm yet to win this thing. So I can't quit it. So hopefully this is the year I can win and leave that league forever, because I don't actually like head-to-head format at all.
I don't like it. For baseball either. I think it's a perfect format for football, for, some other, maybe NBA, but yeah, for baseball, give me Roto all day.
Yeah, Roto for sure. And if you're going to play head-to-head, to me, just set the scoring to the 1-win format, right? So if you beat me, you're 1-0 and I'm 0-1, right? Rather than the way that they do it where it's like, you won 5 categories, so you get a 5, and I won 4 categories, so I get a 4.
Yeah.
That's just dumb. That's not the right way to do it. If you're going to make it head-to-head, make it true head-to-head.
And so going back to your strategy of not drafting starting pitchers. So the idea is you're punting on wins, you're punting on strikeouts, and you're just trying to absolutely crush everybody in ERA, WHIP, and saves.
Yes, essentially, you were looking to dominate the 2 pitching, the pitching category you're looking to dominate the ratio categories, the ERA and WHIP. Word ratio escaped my brain for a second there. You basically need to either 12 or 11 those 2 categories. You're looking to 12 or 11 every single one of the 5 offensive categories, because the way you approach the draft is you go your first basically 10 picks are all bats. And no one else is doing that. So you're loading up your starting offense with the best possible bats. And you're looking for 5-tool players, right? You're looking for guys who are going to fill power and speed, hit for average. So a lot of the times I'll skip over a guy, let's say like a Kyle Schwarber, who's going to hit, 220, but hit maybe 40 home runs, but not steal bases, not fill those other categories, in favor of someone who was going to hit 280, 300, hit 25 home runs, steal 15, 20 bases, and score a bunch of runs. So you have to make those choices along the way, and you have to be drafting the right kinds of players to make it work. But it works very, very well when you execute it right. And then you're just looking, as soon as you fill that starting offense, you immediately click over, completely forego any concerns about average draft pick position, and just start drafting the most dominant strikeout potential relievers available, whether they're middle relievers or closers, because the middle relievers are good because they can book you the occasional save, and they'll also book you the occasional win while getting those strikeouts and dominating the ratio stats. So you can actually kind of middle wins a little bit while getting a bunch of saves. So you actually gain, you can 4 or 5 wins, which can sometimes be a critical, 4 or 5 points in that setup. So you don't completely punt anything, but those are definitely, you're going to be down the board in wins, down the board in strikeouts totals.
Yeah, I would have just assumed that you'd be getting, ones or twos at the best from strikeouts and wins, but you're able to sustain like 4 or 5 points in a 12-team league.
Yeah, when you're getting guys like, these high strikeout relievers like a Giovanni Gallegos, and Eric Swanson comes to mind as a guy who's on my a bunch of my teams. Joan Duran, the closer out and with your Twins, just the flamethrower. Munoz and Seawald out in Seattle. These are guys who are on a bunch of my teams. Evan Phillips is on a bunch of my teams. You can string together a couple of those guys and basically replicate a premium starting pitcher. Right. If you look at Giovanni Gallegos' numbers for his career, he's essentially Jake DeGrom, just in very, very small doses at a time. His numbers are that good. Like, he is insanely talented. He just only pitches 1 inning at a time. So you got to kind of piece it together. You got to make sure you're getting your starters in there every single day. It's difficult in a daily league, but you can make it work. And it's a very effective strategy. When it does work, you can dominate a league.
So assuming that you've been using this strategy for multiple years now in some leagues where it's a repeating, the same people you're playing against year to year, does anybody like catch on and try to stop you from doing that? I don't know if it's really easy to do, but.
So this is something that I can't do in our contract league. Like, I've got a few starters on the books. We actually added saves. We converted saves to saves plus holds this year, so it's a little bit more viable even. So I'm trying to angle my team for the future toward that. But this is actually something that I just do in these public redraft leagues where nobody knows me. You can look at my profile and see what my teams have looked like, and I've got mixed results because I've been playing for so long, and a lot of times I'll forget shit, and how a season long goes. But when it's effective and when I've deployed it, this is the first time I've done it across this many teams all in the season, just saying, hey, I'm going to go all in with this approach this year. So a lot of teams are mix and match across the profiles history, but I've definitely won leagues with that approach in Yahoo public leagues before.
Interesting. It's fun to just have like a different kind of approach to try these things and see it win. That's got to be a lot of fun.
Yep.
All right. Enough about season long.
Completely baffled during those drafts at some of the picks that I'm making, especially when we get to the middle. It's like, you took who?
A relief pitcher?
A
non-closer?
This guy on the board. Yeah.
That's funny. I had to do a little aside there just because I thought it was interesting. You're in so many season-long leagues, and so I think I started around 2001 also on Yahoo. I think just never got to 30 teams. Sometimes I get to like 6 or 7 NFL teams that's weekly, and I'm like, this is too much. So I don't know how you handle 30 baseball.
It's definitely a lot. Yeah. Especially when I have to sit hey, it's time to set my lineups, especially if it's 12:45 on a 105 day. Sure. I got 30 teams to go through. That can be aggressive. But the good thing is, it's basically, since I drafted such similar teams across all 30 of them, because I was going with that approach, and there's only so many different angles into the action, and especially after the first round, like I might have a different first and second round pick, but a lot of everything else just evens out because I'm still targeting those same guys all the way down. So a lot of it, after I do the first 2 or 3, it's like, all right, this one, and I can do them quickly. So that plays to my favor. But yeah, it's a lot to manage. Might have been a mistake.
No doubt. All right. So back to DFS. So 2015, you're looking for, you started in 2014, May of 2014. By mid 2015, you're looking for tools and stuff. Were you a winning DFS player right away? So back in 2014, were you winning right away? Did it take you a couple of years? How was your success early on?
So I was hand building, and I don't remember having anything here. I couldn't find my in my phone. I was looking back to see when like my first 4-figure win was. When did I really hit something that meant anything? I assume that, in the first week and change there, I was at least cashing and doing okay. And I was entering like 1 to 3 lineups, it looks like, going back through some of the history here. But like I said, I signed up for FanDuel on May 21st of 2014. And then looking through old emails on May 27th of 2014, I had a Google chat with my buddy Lou, in which I said, have you checked out FanDuel at all yet? And he said, no. And I said, it's pretty cool. You assemble the lineup from a pool of everyone with a salary cap factoring in at 35,000. Actually, a salary cap number making it difficult, and complete attorneys with big prizes. And then he asked about like how much money you have to put in. I told him $2, and he asks how it works, like bankroll wise. I said it's like an online poker account, and we went from there. So presumably I was doing at least okay and having fun. So, but I couldn't find like how successful I actually was in those initial tournaments. But it wasn't too long before, if memory serves, my first win of note was a $5,000 win. In a baseball tournament. And I think it was that year, but it might have been in 2015. It might have been the next season. And what I was doing at this point in my life was, because of how FanDuel was set up, I think it was at this point. It was definitely at least in 2015 when I was using those tools. That's when I was working in Manhattan, and it was legal in Jersey, but not legal in New York. Ooh. So I would have to put my entries in the morning as placeholders, and then I could edit them from New York during the day. But I would, you'd want to be as close as possible to lock. So I'd be at the end of the day, 5:30, 6 o'clock in my office, trying to lock shit down, trying to run this optimizer tool that was running Excel in the meantime. And then what I would have to do is I would have to take a screenshot of that and then take that over to the bus and start entering those lineups and editing those lineups by hand as I was on the bus. If I forgot to put in my placeholders, I would have to be on that bus ride and immediately start entering lineups as soon as we crossed the border in the Lincoln Tunnel back into New Jersey. So it was a fun little exercise, and a lot of craziness and hand building and hand entering back then. But interestingly, if you want to hear it, and stop me if you don't, I actually found what I believe to be my first ever FanDuel entry. Because apparently, and I don't remember this at all, but apparently back then they sent you an email saying your fantasy league is live when these would start, and a copy of your lineup. So on May 21st, 2014, I entered the 12K Wednesday MLB Squeeze early only contest, and my lineup was Yankees starter Chase Whitley, who I do not even remember. So that must have been something of a contrarian play right out of the gate. He was pitching against the Cubbies. Then I had a 2-man Victor Martinez, Miguel Cabrera, Detroit against Cleveland stack. I had Robbie Cano from Seattle taking on the Texas Rangers. And then coming back the other way in that same game, I had Adrian Beltre and Shin-Soo Choo from the Rangers as a mini stack. And then I had an Ian Desmond one-off, a Jacoby Ellsbury one-off, and a Michael Brantley from the other side of that Detroit at Cleveland game. So I actually had a interesting little lineup there. Not what I would call a modern lineup in terms of what I would play. It was also a different setup. I think the scoring was a little bit different. I don't think they had the fractional scoring back then, and no util slot. You had to play a catcher on FanDuel at the time. So it was interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if I played MLB back then. Like, I don't really remember how FanDuel or how MLB on FanDuel has changed over the years. Maybe I just didn't get started on MLB until a couple years later. I started playing NBA in 2013. So that was when I really got started in FanDuel in 2013. But I don't know if I played MLB back then. That's funny that you played a fairly unstacked lineup. I mean, it sounds like that was maybe not even intentionally stacked. Would you agree with that? Or do you think you were keeping in mind, like, okay, these guys bat near each other, so that's points. Maybe you were playing.
So I think probably I was thinking about that in terms of like playing Martinez and Cabrera right there, catcher, first base, middle of the lineup. They were facing Zach McAllister, who I also don't remember. I actually looked up all the results from this game. Once I found this lineup, I actually had to look how they did. I didn't calculate out the FanDuel scores, but I must have had a decent day. Whitley struck out 3, allowed 6 hits, but only a run. Victor Martinez went 3 for 7 with a double, a home run, 3 runs, 2 RBIs. Miggy scored a run and drove one in, walked once. Robbie Cano had a double, a home run. Let's see. Shin-Soo Choo had a home run, 2 runs, and RBI. Michael Brantley had a double, 2 runs, 3 RBIs, and 2 stolen bases. So it must have been a decent day.
So this is why you had to text your friend right away. You're like, this is so easy.
Fell in love.
Yeah, you probably won a lot of money with that lineup. Turned $2 into 100 or something. And you're like, yeah, I'm sold.
Yeah, that it was. I tell you what, it was probably one of those frustrating ones though too, because Ian Desmond went 1 for 4 with no counting stats, and somebody else in here, Ellsbury, went 2 for 6 with no counting stats. So like, it's probably one of those ones that was like, oh, look how well this lineup's doing. Look how, and then those two, dings in that lineup probably took it down some. So
sure,
that's probably what really got me engaged in like, all right, I can do this. I can make this work. I just need to figure out those 2 spots and we're good here. Yeah. So it was probably the frustrating loss rather than a win that hooked me more, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I can hear that. And then where and when did you get started doing DFS content, and how? Tell me about your backstory with DFS content.
So where did I get started doing DFS content? I would say it would be in the Awesemo at the time, Stokastic, me, Awesemo, Slack channels at the time, just as a member, just firing away content, hanging out in the chats for the various shows. That's kind of where I just got started as far as actually wanting to put stuff out into the world. I'd been lurking on the fringes of all these different DFS sites, like you and I talked about before the show. I don't have a Roto Grinders profile. I never really got into the whole following different people and knowing who's tweeting about what and who's got a problem with which other guy. Like my mind just starts to hum, and I just play a song on repeat in my head when people start talking about that, because I just don't care. I really just don't care who hates who in the industry, who thinks somebody's a jerk, who took money from who. Like, fine, that's all great and everything. So I always stayed away from that. I always found that a lot of the different sites had, toxic is a strong word, but something along those lines, in terms of the communities where I didn't love what was going on in a lot of the environments. There were good people in a lot of them, but I didn't love some of the experts from some of the different sites, the communities from some of the different sites. So I never really got involved until I found Stokastic, until I found Awesemo, and just really liked the people that worked at the site, really liked some of the people that were in the community, found it a good community where people were, interested in sharing ideas and everything. So that's when I kind of got involved. And then one day I just happened to reach out to Josh, who I talked to a lot, like I said earlier in the show, and just asked him, hey, you guys hiring? And he said, yeah, I could probably at least put in a good word. Went from there, started writing, started doing some content. My actual first day at Stokastic as an employee was the Rudy Gobert COVID day.
Oh no.
So the day that the world of sports shut down was technically my first day of doing content at Stokastic. So we spent that summer writing about Korean baseball. I spent that summer writing 2 articles a day for what was then Side Piece, where I was just spinning up whatever, blog kind of nonsense. Top 5 things I miss about a real summer, top 10 movies about this, so on and
whatever
so forth.
List you can think of.
Exactly. Yeah. Just that listicle format, trying to be funny and, generate any kind of clicks to keep the site rolling. So that was a fun, let me amend that. I don't want to say that the COVID times were fun, but it was that specific aspect of being trapped in the house during COVID and all of that was fun.
Yeah. It sounds like it would be fun. So I'm here. So you're the original guy in chat, just like giving out picks in chat. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, pretty much. I was putting my somewhat infamous home run model picks in there into chat, and just kind of getting involved that way. And just, I was always willing to help answer questions for people and willing to explain things. Over time, that the desire has maybe diminished somewhat in terms of answering the same question over again. And
sure,
it's not answering the same question over again. Actually, it's when people refuse to accept that answer is the correct.
Yeah. I've been there. The frustration with,
I know you have.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different because you you gave out picks in chat with like a model, like you had a whole like great reason. It wasn't like this player played high school baseball 15 minutes from the stadium, therefore you should play him today. It was actually, you probably had good analysis. You had a model that you're using for your picks. And I know people are still out there asking for your picks pretty regularly. They want to hear about your home run model. So you say infamous. I mean, you must have had some success. People must have found some success with the picks that you gave out. And I think that has continued this year. As I recall, you've given out some picks that I've been like, yep, Terry called that home run already pretty early in the season, already doing quite well.
The old machine. Every single year I have to go into that Excel file, and it is so held together with duct tape and sticks and God knows what in terms of just how this thing functions. Where like one of our guys asked me a question about like, how do you do this in your model? And I was like, I don't even know.
Right.
I literally don't even remember how that works. And if I go in there and start digging, I'm afraid I'm going to break something and never be able to fix it, because it just came together through so many different pieces and so many different sources, where to the point where I have 2 different spots that I have to enter the daily schedule just because of how the damn thing works. So it's so cumbersome. Literally, if I gave it to you, no matter how good maybe, if you spent hours figuring it out, you could get there, but you could not turnkey this thing. It's so old and broken. So every year I have to get into it, hope it still works, remember how to use it. But yeah, we came out of the gates pretty good with, at least, how that some of the data looks, if not my individual results. So happy with, people succeeding with my picks and my analysis and everything. I love nothing more than seeing people win when I'm not.
Yeah, it's very satisfying.
That sounded colder than I meant it. I meant on a night that I'm not winning, I love nothing more than seeing somebody win with my picks.
No, that's how I took it. I didn't sound cold to me because maybe that's just because I can totally relate. It's very satisfying to see other people using the information that you gave them and winning money with it is a very satisfying feeling. But it sounds like it's not a model that you can sell because nobody else can actually run the model. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, no. If somebody said, "Hey, I'll give you $1,000 for your Excel file," and I sent it to them, they'd ask for their money back because they would not be able to make it work.
Okay. Well, then maybe some work to be done just on the making it easier for other people to understand side. If you ever want it, maybe you just don't ever want to sell
the picks and things like that. Maybe there's a way to monetize those someday, but
sure, without
the model itself, I don't know. We might keep behind closed doors.
Okay, makes sense. And Stokastic. So you've worked at Stokastic since 2020. It's been basically about 3 years exactly, right? Since just over 3 years when you first started doing content for Stokastic. Yep. And you've played various roles as Stokastic. What have been some of your roles? I believe at one point I emailed customer support and you were one of the people who was responding to me. What are the various roles you played at Stokastic?
Yeah, so year 1 was that weird, COVID year where I was doing exclusively content. I would do multiple articles a day and then jump on shows basically as needed. But I was on shows pretty frequently. That was as a freelance. Then our CEO reached out to me and said, "Hey, I see you in the chat all the time, helping people out, et cetera, et cetera. Would you be interested in coming on board and running customer service? We needed to be whipped into shape and set up and also I did that for another year. I was behind the scenes. I was doing content and all the shows and all the writing and personally answering customer service emails while also running the team, setting up a bunch of stuff behind the scenes and doing all of that. Parted ways in that role in terms of being a full-time employee and went back to doing contract work around June of last year, I guess. So for various reasons that we don't need to get into, and have been happy, just doing the content that I get these days. I miss writing every day. So as I hinted at the top of the show, I kind of launched my own venture, which hopefully will be in partnership with our friends at Stokastic. I love everybody here, and I want to do it the right way. So everything on mine is right now just content, and you can find it over on my Twitter handle, DigitalB21. There's retweets and so on and so forth. And then you can connect to the other name, which I won't mention on a Stokastic show, but I am creating content again in terms of writing things and then still doing shows for Stokastic right now, which I love doing. And hopefully we'll continue to do a lot, but just through missing the writing every day, was kind of what led me to jumping in with both feet to this venture on opening day of this baseball season.
Sure.
Long winding answer to what have you been doing job wise?
Yeah, so now it's just content for Stokastic. That is your
correct.
Only, you're part-time now. You took a step back from your full-time role to just do part-time. You and I have done a couple of baseball shows already. I'm hoping that you and I will get to do some more baseball shows as well. I love doing the shows with you because I feel like we take fairly in some ways different approaches to. Not really, because you also play very much the game theory aspect, but I guess because you're doing you do all the deep data you're actually doing your own models and stuff, whereas I'm just using the Stokastic stuff. So you're just doing more of the work yourself than I am, I guess, is really the big difference. But it's always fun to talk baseball with you because you know everything about every batter, every pitcher. You have all of the underlying statistics because that's all stuff that you need to know because you're actually making your own model. Whereas some of it's stuff like, oh, I didn't know that because I didn't need to because I'm just using projections that other smart people made for me.
Right, which is. I love baseball. It's, it's a passion for me. But it's definitely nice. Like that's kind of my existence in the NBA, right? Where I'll jump on NBA shows, and if you see me on there, I can talk about a lot of the different statistics, and I've got a whole dashboard that lays it all out in front of me, and I can talk about so-and-so's true shooting and blah, 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 blah. But what I focus on those shows a lot more tends to be the DFS of it. Tends to be how things are coming together on slate for price, for ownership, for leverage, and the things that we really, really care about in basketball. Where with baseball, I do think there's more art than science to baseball lineups to certain degrees. When it comes to determining which teams are in the best position and so on and so forth, it's very much a numbers game. But then there's some art to it in terms of how the lineups are constructed, which hitters you're getting to in stacks, and how you're stringing things together, where I think you can get into the baseball of it a little bit more. So that's where I do think that the baseball of it has value. Talking about hitters' contact profiles. All right, yeah, a guy strikes out 30% of the time, but against this soft tossing pitcher who only strikes 14% of hitters out, I don't really care about his 30% strikeout rate. I care about his 14% barrel rate when he does make contact. So it's things like that you can look between the lines of the statistics for that, a little bit more than in some of the other sports as far as DFS goes, I do feel have at least some degree of import in baseball.
So do you think that those kinds of statistics
enthusiastically agrees over here? That's what.
Yeah, sounds like he's very much in agreement. Would you say that those statistics inform like range of outcomes more so than like projection, is going to encompass all ranges of outcomes? It's just like a median of all of a batter's range of outcomes. When you say that you think that you like to get into the baseball of it all to know, things like barrel rate against a left-hander who throws side, or I don't know what exactly you get into, but like, do you think that
somebody got Nick Lodolo on the mind?
That's right. Do you think that it helps inform like the range of outcomes for you? Like, okay, maybe he's got a higher likelihood of hitting, the higher end of his range of outcomes because of the way he hits against this type of pitcher. Is that like how would you say that it informs your process other than just like, I mean, it obviously affects the projection if a batter is going to do particularly well against a type of pitcher, or do you think that Vegas just doesn't know some of that stuff? So maybe it's not always encompassed.
Oh, there's nothing that Vegas doesn't know. Vegas knows what we're having this conversation right now, and they're going to adjust their models accordingly.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I give Vegas a lot of credit for how smart they are. As my father's famously said, they didn't build all those hotels by losing. So that's definitely, a factor in it. I definitely look at their run totals and everything, but I do think there are things that at least the DFS public in general probably doesn't understand about the mechanisms of baseball and how that works. So it can probably, more than saying this guy, well, yeah, it can say that this guy's got an extended opportunity to reach the ceiling of his range of outcomes, where the public might not necessarily recognize that. Last night, a guy named Bobby Dahlbeck was in the Red Sox lineup. And if
you love Bobby Dahlbeck, because I recall.
Prospect, yeah, you thought we were getting through this podcast without hearing the name Bobby Dahlbeck.
No,
you just
I did not. I did not think so.
But the reason I mentioned Bobby Dahlbeck is he's a guy who, the world at large does not think much of. He's struggled throughout much of his major league career, but he's got a phenomenal contact profile when he does make contact. He's got a history of being a monster slugger in the minor leagues, and he's got a great bat. He was in DraftKings yesterday, and he didn't come through for us, right? He went, I think, 0 for 4. He made an error in the field, cost Chris Sale an opportunity. So wasn't a good game for old Bobby. But what I liked was he picked up random shortstop eligibility this year. He's like a hulking, like first base, third base kind of a guy, and now plays shortstop. And he was the dead minimum price on DraftKings yesterday, hitting 6th in the Red Sox lineup. That's a guy who could go out and hit you 1 home run, 2 home runs, have a monster performance at low ownership. So what I think, knowing the game, knowing things like what a guy's contact profile looks like, or what his prospect pedigree was, some narratives that I kind of dismiss in other sports, I can embrace a little bit more in baseball, because I do think there are things that are not necessarily uncovered in just the projection form, in just looking at the numbers. Now, that said, all of that exists in the numbers, and much of that is accounted for in how I do things in my model. So those things do come out in my projections as well. Right. It's just a matter of, I can talk about them with people when I'm on the shows. I can write about them and help, kind of elucidate those things. If I was just doing it, I wouldn't have to sit here and think about it. It would just come out the other side of my model, and it would be a shorter day.
Yeah. I mean, you can talk about this stuff for hours. I think if our shows did not have a stopping point, I'm sure you could get into every little stat that informs your model with ease, I would think.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of parts of it that I just need to remember exactly how they work because I built it so long ago, and it was so kludgy and cobbled together. But yeah, I could get into all sorts of different stuff with it. So wherever we wanted to go.
So is your model, is it something that you're still adjusting at all? I mean, it sounds like for the most part, it's something that you kind of set it and forget it a few years back, and it's just been it's worked well enough that you don't feel the need that you need to adjust it. Maybe you don't want to break something that you don't need. Sorry, don't try to fix something that's not broken, I guess. Is that your approach here?
Yeah, it gets updated with the previous year's stats and everything. Sure. And current year, as we hit a certain point in the season, that'll be a little ways down the road. I'll bring more current year stuff into it. So it certainly rolls along in terms of the data that it uses to inform the numbers, but the actual model itself, the math, hasn't been changed in a while for the baseball one. Basketball, I basically rebuilds from the ground up every year. Same with football. I don't really use my football model that much anymore. I kind of run it alongside, but then just use a lot of stochastic stuff. So I got to bring that one back up to speed a little bit, but it's been successful in the past. Basketball, it runs so similar to the stochastic model that I can switch back and forth between the two. I actually built a new version this year that, I was trying to take maybe a unique look into, instead of per minute or per possession, I was looking at some per touch numbers where, how frequently has the guy just got his hands on the ball rather than looking at like a usage. So I was trying to do that, and it created some interesting looks at, positional differences for DFS purposes, but ultimately I'm not sure how valuable it would be, because it essentially projects out very, very similar to what we're getting from Stokastic, what my other, per possession model was giving me. So not really a major difference that I uncovered there. But yeah, and then other things like you mentioned that I had a nice NASCAR win. I had a nice NHL win. Those both came during the NBA All-Star break this year over that weekend. I had
you had
fourth place in that NASCAR one, and then I entered 2 NHL tournaments this season, one on the first day of the NHL season that I was not overly successful in, and then one that weekend, and I won that one for 10 grand. So
wow,
nice little results there, but that was entirely thanks to Stokastic, the top stacks tool for NHL. Functions very much like top stacks for baseball, and you can kind of go from there.
Yeah, easy enough to read. That's incredible. You got two wins during the NBA All-Star break, just sports you don't usually play. It was a nice,
productive little break.
That's really fun.
Yeah, I think it was 4th in NASCAR for like 4 or 5 grand, and then first in NHL for 10.
Nice. Let me take a minute away from this conversation with Terry McBride, tell you about today's sponsor, BetPro, now available for both NBA and MLB. Stokastic's top-ranked DFS pros have made millions of dollars in daily fantasy contests using Stokastic's DFS player projections. Now users can have direct access to the same player stat projections that drive our winning DFS player point projection models. With this data, users can apply advanced sports analytics to player prop bets and get an edge on the sports books. These projections are directly managed by Stokastic's team of established experts, including Alex Baker, Steve Buzzard, and Sean Zahn. For a limited time, you can get a 7-day free trial of BetPro for new users. Then it's $15.95 per week or $55.95 per month. Use the link in the description of this video. All right. So with all these wins in mind, in which sport or sports in this, I think I know the answer, but I'll ask you, in which sport or sports do you think you have the biggest edge in DFS?
I would say it's probably baseball, but baseball I also think is the most variant and most difficult to actually win. There are a lot of days where I'll be right about 85% of the baseball slate and not come close to winning the tournament, right? Which can be frustrating, but it's also part of the fun of it. Where if I'm 85% right about basketball and I don't have a lineup in the top X, I'm going to be kind of annoyed at myself for screwing something up. Like basketball just flows a little bit more normally than baseball does.
Yeah, it's definitely a very different game. Baseball, I've had longer stretches in baseball where I just a straight down arrow on my roto tracker, what it looks like. I'm like, man, this, and then it's just like, and then when it starts going well, you can see, you jump pretty quickly as well. It's very different from like NBA, where it's just like, you're usually going to find some winning days in the process. Baseball, it's just like, if you're not getting the stacks right and like the combos right with the stacks, it can be a pretty brutal sport at times.
And that's it. You can, like you just said, it's the combination of hitters within those stacks that can burn you too. That can be the most frustrating part. You could be, I had 30 lineups with Yankee stacks in them. How did I not come through tonight? And you say, oh, because I didn't have Jose Trevino in any of them and he hit a home run.
Right.
It could be that easy.
All parts of the stack. Yeah, it's tough. All right. So process, we'll talk just a little bit about process. So at this point, do you do any of your own simulations or use simulations from outside sources as part of your process?
For basketball, I do have a big simulation process. I use it a little bit in football. And then in football, I also have other tools that I'm just like running numbers against, like standard deviation, to get like outcome probabilities. So yes, basketball is the one where I have a like click go and a thing runs for like 15 minutes and then gives me some output type of a simulation.
Cool.
In that one, it's basically I build out lineups and then I run the lineups against one another to select my most premium lineups from the night. So it's a multi-layered process where I could take any of those lineups and enter them into a contest and be comfortable with the lineups because of they're built through my construction process. And then when they get spit out the other side in the last handful of minutes, and this is where it can get really, really chaotic on a bad night for changes for the NBA for me, because that process does need a little time to run. But I've got a macro-based Excel simulation that records. I can run it 5,000 times, 10,000 times, create 30 million data points for the slate for outcomes, and then pick my best lineups from that. So that's something I've been doing a lot with NBA. I've tried to run, like I said, the same process for NFL for the week, and create 100 million data points for an NFL slate and try and select from that. But it gets really messy really fast, NFL one. So, and I think that NFL works still a little bit better via the old just rank and sort methodology as well, which is what I still use for baseball. Baseball is also one where like I was saying before, more art than science. That kind of comes through in how I select my lineups for baseball.
Sure.
Where I've got my big ranking system. It'll be set up with percentile ranks for projection, for ownership, for my home run rating, for a couple other things. And then I show myself in a dashboard which teams are in there, how are they stacked, which pitcher are they facing, which pitcher is the pitcher for that lineup, and a couple other things. But then I really do go through it after I rank it out and play with the various percentages. I've got a tool that can give kicks to stacks that aren't coming up enough for me in my sort. And then I'll get in, and if I find that I'm not getting enough of a pitcher, let's say, I'll go to the extent where I will just literally filter to just that pitcher and then take the top lineups for that pitcher just to make sure that I'm getting to the right distributions. So yeah, baseball, I get manually involved a lot more than the other sports process wise.
So you say you use your simulator mostly for NBA. To me, that feels like the counterintuitive for me, just because late swap is such a big thing with NBA. Is that why you don't play as much later on in the year? Because do you have, first of all, do you have a late swap mechanism within your simulator to help you make smart late swaps when things change after lock? Or if you don't, is that why
changes? If it's 6:45 and somebody scratches from who was supposed to start in the 7:00 game, I'm probably screwed on that position.
Okay.
That's the one thing that can get me. I'm quick enough with being able to enter a full slate of lineups for 7:00 and change anything that changed for the 7:30 games via an optimizer. I'll just put them back into a late swap in a public optimizer and use that and get to the positions I need. It's not ideal when things change at the last minute for the 7:00 games. That can definitely burn me in that process. I can also bail out of that process at any time, revert to an old rank and sort process, run some new lineups, drop them into that, and be fine, which is typically what I'll tend to do in that situation. I can run a shorter version of the sim too. I can just change how many iterations it runs and get to a quicker output, which is another thing that I'll, depending on how much time is left there, I'll be able to do. So yes, it's a problem, but I've got moderately acceptable solutions for it.
Okay. And then projections. So do you do your own projections from scratch for which sports, if any?
Yeah, for baseball, I use 100% my stuff, except I am currently still using Stokastic's ownership because that's a nut that I've just never bothered to crack because Stokastic is so goddamn good at it.
Yeah.
That I've always used Stokastic data for that. So I'm reasonably good at hey, how do you think this pitcher is going to be owned, and getting a couple guys at a time, but doing the full slate.
It's tough.
Not sure how the guys do it, and they do it really, really well. But yeah, do my own projections, my own home run model, and all of that for baseball. I have all my own models, like I was talking about for basketball. I rebuild basically every year with similar principles, but trying to tweak things here and there. Football, I've had the same one for a while, but I'll always tweak it. And typically, I run that, and I have a dashboard where my projection ends up just as a column. next to Stokastic's projection and a couple other sources. And then I'll use either an average or I'll use Stochastics, or I'll just use one to inform the others. For that NHL, I've always just used Stokastic's data. I have a model that I built a long time ago. I'm not sure how well it works because again, it's just so much a stacking game, and Stokastic's been projecting it so well that why bother?
Yeah.
So I think that covered the 4 majors.
Yeah, that covered them. And how much does ownership play a role for you in creating your lineups?
So it's a very important factor. And it's a very important factor for me. I always want to make sure that I have differentiation. But what I think people really get way too carried away with in the industry and in the audience is individual ownership. Saying that a guy is not a good play because he's popular. And something I've tried to get away from a little bit when I'm doing shows. I'm as guilty of it as anybody. Oh, this guy's going to be owned, blah, 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 knock him down a peg. I don't necessarily know that that's as critical as we make it out to be. It's certainly important, right? You want to have a well-leveraged lineup, but a lot of the time those guys are popular for a reason. And take
Right.
NBA as the best example of that. The field is now so sharp in NBA that the most popular plays of the day are typically the best plays of the day. It's very much for a reason. So I rely on a couple differentiated plays throughout a lineup. I look a lot more at the lineup combination. What's the popularity of that specific combination going to look like? What's the ownership product? And then what is the actual 1 in X probability that other people are going to dupe that lineup? So I care a lot more about being duped, particularly in things like Showdown, which I think somebody asked us a question about. I care a lot more about whether or not my lineup is going to be duplicated rather than what is its, individual ownership, what is its ownership sum, and things like that.
Sure.
So I don't care about a guy's individual ownership number nearly as much as I care about the full picture.
The lineup, yeah, it's about lineup. It's not about individual players.
Yeah.
That's well put. But it's something that you're looking at, just for, you still want to have, within your lineup. You don't want your lineup to be super high owned, and you obviously don't want to run into duplication if you can avoid it at any cost.
Yeah, to the point where, like in Showdown, that's the first thing I'll run a full pool of a ton of lineups, and I'll go and I'll sort it by my 1 in X probability of being duped, and I will take out anything below 1 in 10,000, 1 in 5,000, depending on the field size. Obviously,
Sure.
If you're in a 200 entry tournament, maybe you don't need to get aggressive about it. But in these massive field 200,000 entry tournaments, like, you got to get pretty aggressive, and then you'll still be duped a bunch of times. It's just looking in Showdown in particular for NFL. It's really looking to minimize the number of times that you're duped, because like we talked about at the top of the show, my biggest win of all time was a 5-way chop in a Showdown. We 5-way chopped $1 million. That'll work out. I'll take that anytime. I don't mind chopping 5 ways in that scenario. So it's about minimizing it, not totally eradicating it. You want to be sure you're still playing good, effective lineups.
Okay, so I want to I'll jump to this question from Sam Schaefer, but first, as we set up, do you play Showdown on DraftKings at all for NFL Showdown? I think is what we're talking about here. Do you play NFL Showdown for DraftKings, or do you still only play the single game format on FanDuel?
No, it's pretty much just, I'm pretty exclusive to FanDuel play. What I tend to do on DK is, like, if there's a odd tournament where, like, a golf major or something like that, and they've got $1 million, FanDuel's only got a 50K or something along those lines, then I might jump in and be kind of fishy over on DK. But everything I do is pretty exclusively on FanDuel.
Okay. Well, with that context in mind that you're mostly playing on FanDuel, I don't know if it's going to change anything for the question, but Sam Schaefer wanted to ask you, what to you is more important when building for Showdowns, the players themselves, including all offshoots of that, such as matchups, metrics, narratives, or do you worry more about structure of your build, such as salary usage, position to MVP correlation, stack rules, etc.?
Probably the second one, because it's all, a lot of the things that I do care about from the first set of possibilities kind of inform the second set, right? Things like the players, who they are, their projections, and all of those things inform how that lineup construction is going to come together, and who's going to be allocated into what roles and in what what kind of volume. So it's probably the second one. I would take narratives just completely out of that question. Take narratives out of your process entirely. It's just such a waste of time, guys. People out there listening, Neil, it's now I am here to tell you that narratives are something to get rid of. People do not care about the laundry. People aren't just inspired to play well because they're facing, their old team, or they hate the color red, or any of these different things. Like, it's so not something to chase, and it's certainly not something that we can quantify in projections. So narrative is not a thing for me. But yeah, it would be the latter. It would be about the construction. Like I said, very much I'm paying attention to how the possibility that lineup's going to be duped and minimizing that. And then a lot of the time I'm looking at trying to get a lower owned captain, somebody who's going to give me some salary value with the DK salary multipliers specifically. I want to start working in some of those cheaper lower owned captain plays with some upside, with some potential to hit a ceiling score for me, and then get some of the backfill on the salary where I'm creating lineups in the other positions that maybe other people can't reach because they played a more expensive captain, right? That's going to gain you leverage. That's going to gain you uniqueness. It's going to gain you ceiling and upside. You have to be willing to tolerate a lot of losing. Certainly taking that approach, but yeah, I'd be paying more attention to doing a good contrarian solid build with a good ceiling, leaving salary on the table. I think you're a big advocate of that for showdowns, is how I find one of the most effective ways to get to that result as well.
Yeah, definitely for me, the easiest way to avoid duplication on FanDuel in particular, it can be tough to avoid duplication because it's one less roster spot than on DraftKings, and also the lack of multiplier at the MVP spot. It just, sometimes you end up, the winning lineup would be duped 2,000 times, and it's like, yeah, it's 200,000 to first, and everybody won $600. It's like, it's not even worth it. So like, what steps do you take? So is it just leaving salary on the table? Do you do weird things with your roster construction? What do you try to do to avoid duplication on FanDuel?
Yeah, so probably, it depends, right? We'll see, pretty much taking NFL as the example. We'll see, the quarterbacks are going to be very highly owned captains. We see that all the time, or MVPs on the FanDuel slate. So just as a first step, going away from having those guys as necessarily the outright highest owned guys in that role in my pool, I might spread it out a little bit more. They might still end up the highest owned in my pool, but it'll probably be lower than where the field has them in that role. And I'll get them in the other roles at a higher leverage. So I'm putting them in the different multiplier spots, or I'm putting them into util and mixing things up a little bit just to create different types of lineup, even using the same players. I'm just putting them in different spots, trying to create a little bit of flexibility. I'm trying to get high ceiling wideouts into the MVP spot where there's still going to be that correlation with the quarterback. I can get the quarterback play. If you get a couple touchdowns out of the wideout in a big day, maybe you're off and running. I'm trying to play a lower owned, low volume tight end in a lineup that, if that 2-target tight end happens to catch a touchdown pass in that game, you might be off and running in a low scoring game in a showdown slate. Thank you, Noah Fent, for that $200,000 victory.
Yeah,
that is an exemplification of what I'm talking about there. I think that lineup, if I remember correctly, had both quarterbacks, had a wide receiver from Seattle in the MVP spot, had Noah Fant in it, who caught a touchdown pass at like point something percent ownership, and that was it. That was, the path to victory. So it's really about just making different plays, specifically in showdown, more so than anything else to me. I really want to get creative. I really want to get different in showdown. I use a ton of randomness in the crunches, in the lineup builds, whatever you want to call them, whatever site you're using. Yep. Put heavy randomness in there. Don't be afraid, and just ultimately don't be afraid to lose. Right. We're trying to win these tournaments. Yeah. Especially for showdown, but overall in DFS, right. We're trying to win these tournaments, or we're going to lose them and we don't care. Shooting for cashing is the quickest way to lose your whole bankroll. Right. It just is. So we want to be at the top, or we don't care if we're at the bottom. Like, you have to not sweat losing. You have to be willing to embrace some risk and make some differentiated plays. So,
especially with the payout structure, where it's like 100,000 a first and then 20,000 a second, 5,000 a third. I mean, I'm maybe slightly exaggerating, but the payout structure is just so much to first. And in particular with showdown, it's like, if you don't get first in showdown on almost every slate, you're going to be losing money. Occasionally you can get, a second or third where, the first place was not duped and you can get still plays pretty well. But most of the time you have the best lineup or you don't. And it's, So on FanDuel, say, talking NFL showdown, really, I guess NFL single game is what they call it on FanDuel. What kind of duplication numbers are you looking for? Because there are some sites where it's like, if you really try to make unique lineups, you're probably going to find like 30 viable, totally unique lineups. And then from there, you have to like kind of concede like, okay, I'll dupe, 3 times, 4 times. What's the kind of like max that you'd be willing to try to dupe in a lineup?
So, I mean, if we're talking about one of those tournaments with $1 million up top, let's just make it really simple. Do I want to win 100K? All right, I can be duped.
I take 100K. Times. Sure.
I'll take 100K out of one of those tournaments, right? Let's make it as simple as that. Once we start chopping that even further down, then we get really, really thin, and it's hard to sustain a long-term profitability in that. But yeah, if I can be duped 10 times or fewer in one of those massive field showdowns with multiple hundred thousands of entries, I think I'm pretty happy. I'm shooting for fewer than 10, obviously. I'd love it to be 5, but I'll accept 10 most times out of the gate.
Yeah, I think that's a fair number in general. So the reason that you and I finally ended up scheduling you as the guest on the show is you were in the audience while I was doing a solo MLB stream, and somebody brought up where is the landscape of DFS going? Somebody brought up the idea of like, do you think DFS is going to go away since we have sports betting? And you were in the audience saying that you kind of think maybe the opposite, that maybe this is an opportunity for DraftKings and FanDuel to draw people in from sports betting over to DFS potentially. So I wanted to ask you about that question in particular, where your mind is overall, how you see DFS, the direction of DFS going forward. Where do you see the DFS landscape changing going forward from here?
Yeah, I think it's fairly healthy, right? I think it's a fairly healthy ecosystem right now. We've got 2 huge companies with plenty of capital that are running the show for us right now, and then all these little offshoot type companies that get involved and get promoted on our various shows and everything. But the 2 majors are not going anywhere anytime soon, and they're both involved in the sportsbook industry, right? So I still think that hooking people via fantasy sports is easier than hooking people via straight sports betting. It's still, there's a little bit of a stigma associated in some people's mind, right? We're talking about the general public. We are not talking about anybody who's listening to this podcast or anybody like that, right? But think of, your semi conservative, not politically, but just conservative type person, your uncle or whatever, who's never made a sports wager in his life, doesn't really care about it, but he's played fantasy sports with his buddies for years playing fantasy football. So it's still an easier hook. I think it's still not legal, I don't think, in 100% of states around the country.
Not legal here.
Yeah. So I mean, there's different ways that you can go about is using both cross-pollination from their different platforms, bringing sports bettors over to DFS, but more specifically using DFS as the hook to get people comfortable putting money on FanDuel, comfortable putting money on DraftKings, and then it's very easy for them to move it over with these different promotions. So I think that's, at the very least, we'll continue to see that this is going to be a tool for these sites. I don't know that they're having meetings about, hey, how are we going to advance DFS into the next decade and make it bigger and better and everything. But I just think via, just the rising tide concept, I think just with more and more people betting and more people getting directly involved in things like player props, right? Player props are everywhere these days. It's such a popular way to bet. Well, there's going to be a lot of people losing a lot of money on player prop parlays around the world, but they're going to be interested in the mechanism behind it, and they're going to be having fun doing it. So they'll look for ways where they can still do that and play and be involved and potentially win thousands and thousands of dollars, but also risk less doing it. A $4 entry on FanDuel is a lot more friendly than even a $20 parlay when you're looking to chase specific things. So I think there's a spot for it. It might be, it's certainly more niche than sports betting and straight sports books and a lot of other things, but I don't think it's going away anytime soon. And I do think that there's opportunity for it to grow. We still see the massive prize pools in football. We still see very healthy prize pools in basketball, baseball and hockey, we're second-class citizens a little bit as comes to that, but there's still $30, $50, $100,000 up for grabs every single night. And, more than that if you're playing in multiple tournaments. So I think it's pretty healthy, and I think it's going to be interesting to watch it go forward.
So I hear what you're saying, and I hope that you're right. And maybe it'll happen that they'll grow. My biggest concern, and I'm sure you can appreciate this as a FanDuel guy, and maybe you haven't seen it the same way. I get the impression that FanDuel just doesn't care that much about their DFS product. Like they're just, I feel like they could very easily be filling as much as DraftKings is in terms of like if they put out big contests and they had big prize pools, they could fill it pretty easily. But I get the impression that with sports betting, FanDuel is just like, DFS doesn't make us nearly as much money, so we just care more about sports betting. Do you have any concerns about that? Just like FanDuel is maybe not willing to put in the effort with DFS while it's crushing it so well in sports betting. Is that a concern for you at all, or do you think they're going to figure it out eventually?
I think it'll get there eventually. I think the focus is most definitely on growing the already largest sports book in the country to just even more of a monopoly. If they can buy out DraftKings, they would, so I think there's a lot of focus in that space now, but eventually that's going to hit an equilibrium and they're going to start focusing back toward the other parts of the business. And hopefully it won't be in a cost cutting, we need to fold this and get rid of it kind of a thing. I can't imagine that it incurs much cost for them. It's just a computer program.
Since they have no customer support.
Exactly. Yeah. There's nobody that answers the phones or answers the emails. There's an intern in the closet setting the prices every night, and that's about it. So, I mean, there's not much cost associated with it. So I think they will eventually come back around and say, hey, we've got this whole thing here. We've got this audience. This can be used as a good hook to get people on board, get them used to that dopamine hit of just checking their lineups. Then you offer them a promo and now they're making sports bets. Like, it's just such a natural filter and a natural feeder system for me that I can't see them going away from it. I do agree that they're not currently focused on it, at least not with any, real concern.
Yeah. But hopefully they can right the ship a little bit and start carrying a little bit more. All right. We're getting close to the end. I know Mike has a heart out here, but we got a few more questions I want to get through. Sure. Joe Lacates stated, EMAC TMAC 2024. What do you think? Are you gonna run for vice president with EMAC?
I would definitely happily be on board. I've always considered myself, more of maybe like a chief of staff type of a person. I could probably pull off press secretary if I had to. I don't know that I'm the right guy for VP. I'm going to say that. I'm going to come out and say it. It is it's catchy. If he needs me, if the party needs me, I'll be there. Right. But I'm more a behind the scenes, like chief of staff kind of a role.
All right. Well, you've got my vote if you do whatever capacity you're running. You've got my vote. And Steve Leibowitz asks, how much coffee is too much coffee? First, we'll start with that question. How much coffee is too much coffee?
I have never found that line. I'm currently dealing with an empty mug that I was a full mug when we started this show, and I'll be going back for more after we get off this and jumping back into finishing my article and starting to build lineups, and then probably have even more going into the evening. So there's never enough coffee.
Man, I don't know. I used to drink coffee all day. I had a job where I would drink coffee till 3 or 4, and then I would have not be able to fall asleep, and I'd be wondering, why can't I fall asleep tonight? You're just you're able to sleep even with an evening coffee?
No, this is why I keep the weird hours. Okay,
that's fair. All right, fair enough.
Yeah, I'm up. I'm just naturally, even if I imbibe no caffeine during the day, I would just be up till 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and then I can sleep in. Once I fall asleep, I'm out. I can sleep fairly well, and I'm good at sleeping in through the mornings. But yeah, I'm a night owl by trade, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, I have always been okay at I can have a cup of coffee like out at the diner back in college at 3 a.m., then come in and just crash and go to sleep. So never really had a problem with it.
I did not realize you were such a crazy night owl. I am also. I'm a natural, probably 3 to 11 is my most natural sleep schedule. Of course, I never keep that because I try to keep closer to more conventional hours, but definitely more natural for me.
Yeah, lousy real life gets in the way, but once it became everything works from home, especially during the pandemic times and everything, and then now living the life of I guess DFS pro and guy who writes content.
Seems like it.
I don't want to self-label with that. My God. But yeah, living the lifestyle that I do is kind of conducive to being able to sleep in exactly that, 3, 4 a.m. to 10 a.m., 11 a.m.
It's not bad.
Window. It's not bad.
Not a bad lifestyle. Okay. And then Stephen Leibowitz added one more. What are the 3 advanced stats? And I'm assuming he's talking baseball here. What are the 3 advanced stats you think are most helpful to look at to the extent that you're willing to share? And if you have answers that are not about baseball, if you think this stat in basketball is extremely important, I guess you could throw those out as well.
Send that one Josh Engelman's way and ask him whatever he thinks is the most important 3 advanced stats for basketball. Okay. I'll let him feel that one. He's better at that one for me. On the baseball side of things, it depends on who we're talking about specifically. I talked a little bit earlier in the show about some of the contact metrics that I look at, but those don't necessarily exist in a vacuum, like something like barrel rate. You want the barrel rate, the percentage, like I'm looking right now, Vlad Guerrero Jr. last year, an 11.2% barrel rate, 50.4% hard hit rate, just phenomenal numbers from Vlad. what that encapsulates is that's 11.2% of his batted ball events were barrels, right? So it's not 11.2% of every pitch that he's thrown is barreled. So it depends to a degree. What I like to look at in combination is what is the strikeout rate of the opposing pitcher? How much contact does the opposing pitcher yield? How much hard hit does the opposing pitcher yield? What kind of a barrel rate does he yield? What kind of a average exit velocity does he yield? That's going to inform you a lot about how much contact is available. And then you look at what is the contact profile of those hitters. So if I can get a blend of a pitcher who only allows like a 14 or only generates a 14% strikeout rate, yields over 40% hard hit rate, and a hitter who's got a teens, an 11, 12, 13, 14% barrel rate, 50-ish% hard hit rate, and hits home runs, at a nice average launch angle, which is part of barrel rate. Now we're off and running for some home run potential. Now we're off and running for some doubles, for some run creation potential. So a lot of that is encapsulated in individual stats like ISO, like weighted runs created plus, WRC plus. I refer to those quite a bit throughout shows. On the pitching side of things, I definitely love strikeout rate. I like to look at XFIP. XFIP to me is a lot more important than earned run average or even expected ERA, just because ERA is a flawed stat, the way that they create it, the way that they count runs charged, where XFIP or FIP tell you only specifically things about things that are directly in the pitcher's control. Strikeouts, home runs, or home runs are taken out of XFIP, I think, if I remember correctly. I always have to double check how these stats are exactly constructed, but it tells you the underlying quality of the pitcher rather than the stupid baseball stat of it. There's still a lot of subjectivity in how baseball stats are accumulated. So those are a couple of the things. Swinging strike rates, CSW percentage for pitchers. There's a lot that goes into it. We could keep on going with some of these, but those are at least a few, and a window into how I like to think about them in conjunction with one another.
Yeah. And you use these to inform your model, essentially. Like these go into the Terry's projections. You're not, using them individually necessarily to make decisions, but because they are informing your model.
Yep. A lot of what I just talked about in terms of the barrel rates, the hard hit percentages, and so on and so forth, is what informs my my home run model. Nice. And that is a part of what informs the fantasy point projection. And yep, that's definitely how it comes together.
Nice. Okay. Well, we have just a few more minutes, but I do like to close this show talking about big wins. Can you tell me about your favorite DFS or sports betting, poker, whatever you want to talk about, I guess, favorite win or win celebrated? If there's a couple that are up there, you can talk about multiple too.
Let's see. One of my favorite first big wins was a baseball win. First time I won like wow, that's a lot of money kind of a number. I think it was a $30,000 win. And it was a game, it was in baseball, and it was a game where I had stacked Yankees in a Yankees versus Red Sox game that I was attending with my uncle, who did not know that I was playing FanDuel. So the Yanks went off, hit multiple home runs. I think Gary Sanchez had a 2 home run game, if I remember correctly. Forget what else was in the lineup. Joe Ross was the pitcher. If you remember Joe Ross from, he was on the Nationals at the time. Low end, cheapo pitcher, value pitcher. Forget who the other stack was, but it was I think it was a 4-4, might've been a 4-3, but just kept on hitting. And I'm watching this Yankees game, and I'm at this Yankees game, and I'm checking my phone, and I'm like, and like they were none the wiser the entire time. We were having beers, and I was just like, I don't know why I didn't want to share it. It's weird that I didn't want to just be like, hey, look, I'm winning a bunch of money. But like, I don't know.
When it's not over yet, I get, you don't want to jinx it. Is that it?
Well, that's true for sure. That's I never do like to talk about a win before the win has happened. But yeah, I've always just been like, we were talking before the show, like I don't tweet screenshots really. My family, my parents never really knew about many of my big wins until more recent times, when it's been more sustained success, and just was obvious, like, why do they have you on these shows? Oh, because you've won money doing this. Right. Oh, wow. Okay. I guess we're okay with you doing it. So yeah, I've just been weird about talking about it, but yeah, that was a really fun one to be at the game and have the Yankee stack really connect for me. That's probably my favorite, like, individual story.
And so wait, did you eventually share then? I mean, you're hanging out with your uncle once it was final. Did you never shared the rest of that night? So you didn't celebrate with anybody. It was just a Terry silent celebration.
Just was happy for myself, and had a few more beers and finished the game and went on home.
Nice.
Which, yeah, I'm bad at celebrating wins. I gotta be honest. I don't make big purchases. I don't really, throw lavish parties with beautiful women or anything like that. kind of here in my office and take the dog for a walk or something like that, and more money in the bankroll.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, and it sounded like you had another that you were gonna say maybe throw in there as well, or was I misreading that? I thought maybe you were leading into another that was competitive there.
A few flashed through the old brain, but that's probably the best one story wise. There was one of my, was it a basketball win at the beginning of this season? I think it was a basketball win at the beginning of this season. It might have been that big football win, but it came. Have you ever seen the movie The Witch? It's like 2015 horror movie.
Don't think so.
Okay. There are these creepy children who sing a song in it and then laugh, have this creepy child laugh. And that scene, for some reason, like I think it popped up on YouTube, something like that. There was something where like I watched that scene just as the game finished, and I jumped from like not winning much money to winning the entire tournament. And it got into my brain that like, that helped me do that. So then I played this creepy child laughing thing where they're singing this sing-song thing about the devil several times late in tournaments, trying to conjure that to victory again. Not that I actually believe in all that.
So you're a Satan worshiper. What I'm hearing is,
so yeah, we're dabbling in Satan worship and lighting black candles and securing all these victories is what.
Of course, got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, look, sometimes we smoke a little pot at night and we get creative with what we think about these things. But right. Didn't actually believe any of that stuff, but I did amuse myself by doing that a couple different times. So I thought that's funny. And then one of my most. It's funny how DFS works, right? One of my most heartbreaking nights was a night where I think I won 20 grand or 25. But it was one of my best bad beat stories from DFS. I was like a quarter point behind the leader who had nobody else going. And I had LeBron James, and he had gone on and scored like 52 points that night. And we're ticking down. And seconds left in the game, LeBron gets an outlet pass and he's all alone. He's streaking down the court wide open. Best player in the history of the NBA, arguably. Blows the layup.
No way.
Bunny layup. Would have won me 50 grand instead of like 20, 25. So it's difficult to be like, wow, bad luck story, when you win that much money and take second place. But yeah, best player in NBA history. All he needed to do was sink a bunny layup on a breakaway and banked it off the backboard and off the side rim for whatever reason. So
that is
a lot of fun ones like that too.
Yeah, I mean, I've had plenty of those in my history as well. Those just, Oh my God, why did that just happen? But we could talk about those off air, I guess. The rest of them, but yeah, that's a brutal beat. Well, okay, Terry, we've come to the end of the show. Remind people once again, where can they find you? And again, thank you very much for coming on as a guest. Really love talking with you. But yeah, tell people where they can find you.
Oh, buddy, it's been a blast. My pleasure. And thank you for having me. And, apologies for not being available for you those other 34 times that you came knocking. I know you guys wanted me desperately on this show. They can find me at DigitalBeat21 is my main Twitter handle. Anything else in the world content wise that you're looking for from me, you can find from there, retweeted and liked and so on and so forth every single day. And you can always find me around the Stokastic Discord, the Stokastic channel, so on and so forth. I'm here to stay.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much, Terry, once again for joining me on High Stakes episode 35. Thank you to Mike Lawrence for producing as always. Again, you can find Terry on Twitter at DigitalBeat21. You can find Mike Lawrence on Twitter at AwesomeYo. And you can find episode 36 of High Stakes 2 weeks from this Friday. From when this episode comes out, we should have episode 36 will be available on the Stokastic YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for watching. Enjoy your weekend.